Well, now, next week, British Rail and the government launch a new initiative to try and raise private money to save England's most scenic railway line. The railway from Settle in Yorkshire to Carlisle has been under threat of closure for 5 years. British Rail say it's losing £1 million a year and needs millions more for repairs and maintenance. It wants to close the line next spring. But before agreeing, the government is to offer private investors the chance to run the railway. The merchant bankers Lazard brothers will next week issue a prospectus to test the water. It's a move which some think could be a dry run for wider privatisation of Britain's state railway system. David Coss took the train from Carlisle to Settle to discover what it means to the people who live along the route and what attractions it might hold for investors.
Join the train for a 70-mile journey across the roof of England. A Pennine safari, which British Rail itself promises is the most spectacular railway journey in Britain. That's the same British Rail which 25 years ago consigned many of the rural railways of Britain to bittersweet, a line that's regarded with affection by the communities it ties together.
It's a line on its own. This is nothing just quite like it, at least we don't think there is. It has its own characteristics. But apart from that, it always felt to be run by the family firm sort of thing. We were all part of a family, you see.
The faded stations serve few trains now, peeling shadows of their heyday. Then they proclaimed the confidence of the engineers who built these windswept outposts of Victorian Gothic. Langwathby, Appleby, Kirkby Stephen, Dent, all strung along an improbable skein of steel which vaults on 21 viaducts, burrows through 14 tunnels, across moors and dales empty, but for sheep and 4 square stone hamlets. The long drag, the firemen shoveling coal on the steam trains used to call it, and that's what it's been for British Rail for over 20 years. The relentless Pennine weather has battered the railway and the accountants' estimates from the start. Now, says British Rail, millions need to be spent on repairs, quite apart from an operating loss of £1 million a year. It must close, it says. There's no more public money to plough into the battle with the elements. Today, local opposition to closure is fierce and highly coordinated. Appleby, like other threatened communities, is holding last-ditch protest meetings, organised by a joint action committee.
I am Keith Morgan. I'm the Mayor of Appleby in Westmoreland. I was asked...
The protesters say their local councils have proved that the line can make more money. The councils paid British Rail to run more trains and reopen stations. The result, a boost in commuter traffic.
On this line depends more than trips for tourists. It provides convenient access to further education in Carlisle, wider opportunities for work and greater possibility of job satisfaction because of greater choice.
Before the new services began, just 5 pupils from Appleby Grammar School enrolled for the Technical College in Carlisle. But this year, 34 plan to take the train to higher education.
If the children could rely upon the service, then more of them would be taking up this opportunity. We have 27% this year applying for the Tech. If we have the same numbers next year, and they're 2-year courses, the morning trains could be very busy. There are a number of people in Appleby who work in Carlisle much prefer to take the train. You know, if you're a student and you're travelling by train, it's much more comfortable if you want to study on a train than on a bus.
But it's just such a bus service that British Rail is offering as an alternative.
Well, I don't think the Minister's ever been here in winter. The roads are closed, the journey time is much longer, and if we actually look at the proposed alternative bus service put forward by British Rail, many of the journeys would take 3 times as long at 3 to 4 times the cost to the traveller. We don't think that's an alternative.
For local people, the line is their link to work, hospital, big shops and the world outside the Dales. For the tourists, it's a unique entry to their peace and beauty. The Yorkshire Dales National Park authorities realised that. They backed a special tourist service, Dales Rail. It proved to be another winner, making money for the line.
We're travelling because we heard it was some of the most beautiful scenery in Britain, and we're staying in the Yorkshire Dales, and we wanted to enjoy it. We enjoyed the trains.
I've been to see my daughter in hospital in Newcastle today, and I link up with the Newcastle train, so it's very handy.
If this line closed, what difference would that make to the journey?
Virtually impossible.
We're travelling just for a pleasant afternoon out and a pleasant ride. Leave the car at home.
Well, at the moment, we're still waiting to see the views because it's bucketing with rain outside.
The Victorians introduced the first Pullman cars on this line. Victorian values don't apply today. British Rail denies allegations that it has deliberately run down the line. The protesters say that past neglect is why it now needs millions spent on it. How many millions is hotly disputed. At Ribblehead, the pride of the line, the 24 arches of the Ribblehead Viaduct symbolise the clash. For over a century, it's defied the moorland weather, including the Helm wind, a legend among generations of railwaymen.
There was a train of motor cars going over the bridge and passing Blaymore, and it was night time. And the signalman there could see the train going by, and he rang the control. He said, "Is this a full load, or are there spaces on it?" Because sometimes there were, you see. "No, it's a full load, is this?" "Oh, well," he said, "he didn't know. He said, we've lost some somewhere," and it had actually ditched 5 on the bridge.
Rain and ice are dissolving Ribblehead Viaduct. The water seeps down through the limestone, leaching out the mortar, opening the way for frost to crack the masonry. British Rail says repairs would cost £5 million. Others say under half of that and are prepared to put money on it. At Carlisle Castle, at the end of the line, English Heritage, guardian of national monuments, is making history pay. Lord Montague, its chairman, insists that the viaduct is as worthy of preservation as any castle.
Well, there's no doubt in our minds, and I think everybody else is, that it's one of the most spectacular examples of Victorian engineering in the country. It is a scheduled monument, and Parliament lays on this responsibility of protecting the ancient monuments. Now, we would far prefer to see it continue as a railway line, because we think that's the best way it can be preserved. But we are, in fact, doubting the British Rail estimate of the repair cost of £4 million, and at our suggestion, they are doing a sample repair on one of the bays, and we think it's going to be more like £2.5 million rather than 4. And we very much hope that with our encouragement, we are putting money in to show the importance of £1 million, and we hope others will come along and help us save it.
The only hope for the Carlisle to Settle line is that sort of outside investment, according to the government. The Department of Transport says it's inclined to agree to its closure early next year, unless next week's prospectus produces an infusion of private money. Conservatives want private investment to replace public subsidy.
There are companies in the last few years who've made a distinct success of creating what one, I suppose, could in parentheses call Disneyland type schemes off the beaten track. Then I imagine that those who cater for the leisure industry, hotels and so forth, could be interested. Indeed, some of them have already expressed interest. But I think essentially we're looking for a partnership here, aren't we? I mean, there is a substantial amount of public money on offer. There is access to MSC funds, which is not available at the moment. And there are private sector companies who I think, given the willingness of central and local government to partly to fund the project, could be attracted into putting money in themselves.
Others say that the Carlisle to Settle line has wider implications, that British Rail wouldn't object to a Disneyland tourist railway, but that it would find a serious private competitor a real threat to its monopoly.
They will be very worried about a professional railway company making a success of it, because that threatens their monopoly in a very practical way throughout much of the system. Much of the system loses money, as many people know. And it may well be that with better management and a much better approach to running the business, these lines that are presently unprofitable could well be profitable.
It's been a 5-year fight to save the Settle-Carlisle. Its fate will be decided by the government towards the end of the year. Without private investment, the trains will be gone by the time next spring's lambs are born on the moors. On one thing, everyone's agreed. Once the last train leaves Settle and the Pennine weather closes down on the abandoned line, it would be impossible to bring it back to life.